Chapter 161, In Vivo Experiment 2. Anduin remained expressionless, like a robot, seemingly unaffected by the wailing around him. He calmly observed the changes on the dashboard, silently writing and drawing on the record board. After the receptors experienced violent mood swings, the mana value did not change significantly. It seems that emotions only affect the strength of mana and do not cause changes in mana reserves, he noted. After making the record, Anduin glanced at Tokiel. By this time, Tokiel had been tormented by severe pain and had lost consciousness. His eyes were rolling back and foam was forming at his mouth. It seemed unlikely he could persist until the next stage of the experiment. I wonder if Frank's memory will change after experiencing such strong emotional fluctuations. Let's do a memory check later, Anduin thought. He pulled out the magic gauge inserted into Tokiel's body and used the Healing as Before spell to heal Tokiel's injuries. Then he turned his attention to Goyle, who was standing beside him. Seeing Anduin notice him, Goyle felt as if he were being stared at by a hungry wolf. His hairs stood on end, and he began shaking his head and struggling. His mouth, sealed by magic, could only produce muffled sounds of protest. The meaning was clear. He did not want to experience the same treatment as Tokiel. But Anduin didn't care about Goyle's feelings. He inserted the measuring instrument into Goyle's chest without hesitation. Looking at the value displayed on the measuring instrument, he couldn't help but frown. You look like a tall man, but your magic power is only 469 ticks. That's quite low, Anduin remarked. The next step is to test the second item, the influence of different organs and limbs on the mana value. It is reasonable to assume that the integrity rune, no matter where it is inserted, should display the same value, but we still need to test it to be sure. To the onlookers, Anduin appeared as a different person. This gentle-looking young man kept pulling out the instrument of torture from Goyle's body and then inserted it into other parts. The abdomen, lower abdomen, shoulders, arms, and thighs. No matter how much blood oozed from Goyle's body, Anduin would punch the wound a few times, and it would heal instantly. Under Anduin's constant thrusting and healing, Goyle's face contorted with continuous pain, and sweat poured from his body. After a while, Goyle was covered in blood, sweat, and even a puddle of urine. Yet, there were no visible wounds on his body. This young man was simply a devil. Facing the most evil dark wizard in the world was less frightening than facing Anduin. The most unacceptable thing for Goyle, Crab, and Karkaroff was that they didn't even know Anduin. Why did they have to face this torment all of a sudden, especially when they were sleeping peacefully at night? Anduin, naturally, didn't know what these experimental subjects were thinking, nor did he care. He efficiently inserted the measuring instrument into the living body and recorded the data. Regardless of which part is pierced, the magic power measured from the receptor is basically the same. However, it gradually shows a downward trend as time goes on. Is this due to the decline in magic power caused by blood loss? During the third phase of the test, we will focus on observing this, Anduin concluded. He nodded with a smile. Today's experiment was very successful, and the data was very accurate. It was hard not to be pleased. As Anduin laughed, the others couldn't help but think he was enjoying Goyle's pain, indulging in the pleasure of torturing others. Karkaroff, Crab, and Yaxley watched Anduin's joyful expression, and such thoughts emerged in their minds. Tokiel, who was gradually waking up, also watched Anduin continue to torture Goyle. The anger and resentment in his heart began to grow. Could it be that this young man is cold-blooded, actually torturing others for fun? At this moment, Anduin wiped the blood off the measuring instrument with a handkerchief and then turned his attention to his third test subject. Goyle had already passed out from the ordeal, unable to endure any longer. Yaxley, now the focus of Anduin's attention, was trembling uncontrollably. His face was as pale as paper, almost translucent like a layer of wax. Is it my turn? He thought in terror. Why was I so naive to think I could challenge this guy? Without giving Yaxley time to dwell on his regrets, Anduin swiftly inserted the measuring instrument into his chest. It was as if Yaxley were not a person, but a mere carcass awaiting dissection. This time, however, Anduin did not immediately record the data. Instead, he walked over to the operating table and retrieved a glass syringe, at least 7 or 8 centimeters thick, attached to an infusion tube with a thick needle at the end. The third item of magic power measurement, the correlation test between blood and magic power. Let's first examine the effect of gradually drawing out blood on the magic power value, Anduin announced, his voice clinical and detached. He began the procedure by pulling out Yaxley's hand, locating a blood vessel, and inserting the needle deeply. Yaxley, unsure of what Anduin intended, began to struggle. Is this devil going to test his instruments of torture on us? No, please, no, he thought frantically. Seeing Yaxley's resistance, Anduin's expression darkened with displeasure. Even with such a long measuring instrument stuck in his chest, he still has the strength to move around? He muttered. With a quick impeding charm, he subdued Yaxley and resumed his experiment. Anduin started to pull the suction pump of the giant needle, and blood slowly flowed back along the infusion tube into the empty syringe. He watched the value on the dashboard intently. As the blood was drawn out, the pointer on the measuring instrument began to retract slowly, moving from 412 to 410. By this point, Anduin had extracted nearly 40 milliliters of blood. Based on Yaxley's weight, the blood in his entire body is about 4,000 milliliters. After extracting 1% of his blood, the mana value drops by 2 points, which is about 0.5%. So, the blood contains almost half of a wizard's magic power. Is this the same for all wizards, or are there individual differences? It seems a blood test should be performed on all these subjects, Anduin mused. Acting on his thoughts, Anduin quickly returned Yaxley's blood and proceeded to draw blood from the other 4 subjects. He showed no concern for the potential infection of these Death Eaters, not even bothering to change the needle. He simply grabbed each one, plugged them into the measuring instrument, and began pumping. After conducting a round of tests on all 5 subjects, Anduin concluded that the magic power contained in the blood was indeed close to 50% of the human body's total magic power. End of this chapter. Chapter 162, In Vivo Experiments 3. Anduin's eyes lit up as he examined the collected data. Is the magic power contained in the blood really this high? He mused. If we can directly measure the magic power in the blood, we could deduce a wizard's overall magic power reserve. This revelation sparked an idea. In the future, he wouldn't need to use such invasive instruments to measure mana. The current measuring device required a large contact surface and had to be inserted deeply into the body for accurate readings. But this new method would be much simpler. Creating an alchemy prop to detect blood reserves wasn't difficult. Anduin already had a plan. By drawing a small amount of blood and measuring its mana content, he could calculate the total mana of a wizard using the formula text total blood volume, text blood drawn, times mana value in blood. The next step was to ensure these values were calculated as accurately as possible with a detailed scale. Feeling elated that this experiment had solved a long-standing problem, Anduin looked at his test subjects with joy. These are all treasures, he thought. Next time, I need to conduct more tests. Karkaroff, seeing Anduin's smiling face, shivered. He's laughing again. This nasty guy treats us like toys. Not only does he penetrate us, but he also draws our blood. Who will save me? I'm willing to dedicate my soul to you, he prayed, hoping for some divine intervention. All right, the first phase of the experiment is over. Now we will enter the second phase, Anduin announced, his confidence bolstered by the success of the living body experiment. Many of his troubling questions had been answered. As expected, practice is the only test of truth. Anduin picked up another item from the tool table, a metal chain that resembled a belt. Upon closer inspection, it was made of 9 sections of flat metal sticks, intricately twisted together and covered with charms. He gently placed the metal chain on the ground and chanted a spell. The chain transformed into a small silver snake with a metallic texture. The snake quickly slithered towards Yaxley, who was still restrained. Anduin inserted the magic measuring device into Yaxley's body again. The silver snake clung to Yaxley with surprising speed. The measuring instrument showed Yaxley's magic power rapidly decreasing, while he himself seemed to fall into an ice cave, shivering uncontrollably as his body temperature dropped. Holding a timer, Anduin's eyes frequently switched between the measuring instrument and the timer. This silver snake was a new prop he had created after testing the incapacity spell on Travers. He found the inefficiency of the incapacity spell in draining magic power too low, so he optimized the spell and created a combined prop composed of 9 spells. His original idea was to make a metal net, enchanting each node with a disabling spell. However, due to limited materials, he first made a low-end version of the Spellbinding snake, and the effect was impressive. The target can lose 18 ticks of magic power per second, Anduin noted. This means each optimized incapacity spell can drain 2 ticks of magic power per second. The device is 4 times stronger than when it was tested on Travers. It's evident that with Yaxley's mana reserve, he can drain his entire body's mana in just 23 seconds. The transforming silver snake can also entangle opponents and has a noticeable cooling effect, which serves as a good interference and adds lethal potential. While Anduin was meticulously recording the data, Yaxley was in utter despair. He had no idea what Anduin had done to him. As soon as the metal snake touched him, he felt his magic power rapidly depleting and his body temperature dropping. Freezing to death seemed like a relief, a way to finally escape this terrifying teenager. But just as he thought he might be freed, the magic draining effect ceased, and his body began to warm up. Anduin had retracted the silver snake and thoughtfully cast a warming spell on him. So, even if I wanted to die, you wouldn't let me, huh? Yaxley thought bitterly. At this moment, he had a strange smile on his face, his eyes unfocused and erratic. He stared blankly at the ceiling, his mind teetering on the brink of madness after enduring such intense mental and physical torture. Seeing Yaxley smirking, Anduin scratched his head in confusion. He had warmed him up, so why was he smiling? Ignoring Yaxley's reaction, Anduin moved on to another experiment, this time with Crab. Anduin took out another device, which consisted of 2 parts, a baseball-sized, round metal ball connected to a thin metal chain resembling a small meteor hammer. However, this was not a weapon, but a new alchemy tool he had created. He was unsure of its effectiveness at the moment. Originally, there should have been a small metal suction cup on the other end of the chain, engraved with the energy-absorbing spell he intended to test. He had not yet determined the most suitable rune structure, so he had 7 different suction cups with various rune structures to test. The metal ball was an optimized energy storage device, theoretically capable of storing magic power, though with some natural loss and limited storage duration. Compared to other energy storage alchemy props on the market, it had a much better effect, with a larger storage capacity and longer storage time. Anduin quickly assembled a suction cup and connected it to Crab's body. To test the effect, he used a measuring instrument. No 3, number 1, no 0.6, and number 0.2 runes are invalid. Number 1 rune absorbs 0.3 ticks of magic power every 0.3 seconds, stores energy for 2 ticks, and has an energy storage efficiency of 1 per second. Number 0.8 rune absorbs 0.4 ticks per second, stores energy for 4 ticks, and has an energy storage efficiency of 1 per second. Number 2 rune absorbs 0.5 ticks every 0.5 seconds, stores energy for 5 ticks, and has an energy storage efficiency of 1 per second. End of this chapter. Chapter 163, Torture. From the perspective of energy storage efficiency, it seems that rune number 7 is better, but rune number 6 has a faster absorption speed. Maybe I can improve them a bit and develop a new rune that combines the advantages of both, Anduin mused as he recorded the data. However, these tasks would have to wait. Now that the necessary experiments were done, it was time to start gathering information. He grabbed Tokiel by the neck and roughly dragged him into the bathroom. Tokiel felt a tingling pain all over his body, and a numbness was beginning to set in. Despite this, the fear in his eyes as he looked at Anduin remained undiminished. After closing the bathroom door, Anduin tightened his grip on Tokiel's neck, stared into his eyes, and activated legilimency. Huh? There's memory protection? Anduin browsed through Tokiel's surface memories, but found nothing valuable. As he attempted to delve deeper, he was blocked by what felt like a layer of air film covering the core memories. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation, and he sensed that it wasn't a clumsy. A special memory protection spell? Anduin wondered. Despite Tokiel being beaten to the point of losing the will to resist, the protection still held, piquing Anduin's interest. Determined, he punched Tokiel's wound a few more times. Tokiel didn't even have the strength to howl, his face merely twisted in pain. Anduin tried legilimency several more times but still couldn't break through the memory protection. In that case, the only option is to use Veritaserum, he decided. Without further ado, he took out a bottle of potion and poured it into Tokiel's mouth. After drinking the potion, Tokiel's eyes showed a dull expression. "Name?" Anduin asked. "Torquil Travers," Tokiel replied in a monotone voice. The Veritaserum was effective, which made Anduin perk up. He then asked the question he was most concerned about. "Do you know Sirius Black?" "Yes, he is a member of the Order of the Phoenix." "Did he leak news of the Potters to the Dark Lord?" "Leak? Don't know." "Don't know." Anduin was puzzled. According to his understanding, Travers was a high-ranking Death Eater. How could he not know? Has Sirius been in contact with Death Eaters since Christmas 80? After Christmas, the Dark Lord issued an order to arrest Sirius. We were all looking for him, but he hid very well, and we didn't catch him. "Don't you know that Sirius betrayed the Potters?" "I don't know. I also learned the news from the report." Anduin frowned at Tokiel's answers. He had been searching for the truth about whether Sirius really betrayed the Potters. Hearing such an answer only deepened his doubts. It seemed Tokiel didn't know the inside story, so he decided to ask other questions. "Which Death Eaters do you know, their names and current locations?" Tokiel reported a long list of names, all of which Anduin recorded. Many had been arrested, some had fled abroad, and others had been exonerated. "Barty Crouch Jr., the child of Barty Crouch, Director of Legal Enforcement, is a Death Eater?" Anduin looked at the name on his record board with surprise. This was a significant discovery. In his impression, Director Barty Crouch was a serious and hated person. Could it be that he had been pretending all this time? Or did he not know about his child? But Anduin didn't dwell on it for long. Time was running out, and he still had many questions to ask. "What is the magic that protects your memory?" "Slytherin Spirit Protection Charm." "Oh, could it be a curse inherited from Slytherin? How did you learn it? Where did you learn it? And what is the spell?" "I have not learned it, and I do not know the spell." "Then where did the protective spell on your body come from?" After being released on bail, Yulia feared I would reveal family secrets, so she cast a spell on me using a magic book." "What magic book?" Anduin inquired. "It's the devil." "Ah!" Tokiel, who was about to answer, suddenly contorted in pain. His face twisted into a ferocious expression, as if the words were stuck on his lips but held back by some unseen force. Can this protective spell really have such an effect? Is it because he was asked about the core secret of his family, rendering even Veritaserum useless? Anduin quickly changed the subject. "What precious treasures are there in the Travers family?" "The family treasures are all in the treasury guarded by Yulia. Among them are the Slytherin manuscripts, 5 ounces of refined mithril, and the most precious ones are demons. Tokiel stopped mid-sentence, then screamed, his expression growing more terrifying, as if he was facing something dreadful. Clearly, the spiritual protection spell not only shielded him from legilimency, but also prevented him from revealing forbidden information. "This is no longer just protective magic. It's a seal or a curse," Anduin observed as Tokiel struggled, clutching his head, before fainting. Even the Renervate spell couldn't wake him, making further questioning impossible. However, the information he had already gathered, especially about Sirius, was invaluable. Dragging Tokiel out, Anduin subjected Goyle, Crabbe, and Yaxley to a combination of legilimency and Veritaserum, extracting a wealth of information about the Death Eaters. For instance, the letter found on Yaxley was intended for his brother, who had been exiled in Europe. Many devout Death Eaters couldn't accept the fall of the Dark Lord and fled overseas to regroup. The letter indicated plans to join forces in Europe. Fortunately, I acted quickly. Otherwise, these guys would have escaped, Anduin thought with satisfaction. Next, it was Karkaroff's turn. In previous interrogations, Anduin had tested the fewest methods on him. Now Karkaroff seemed to retain some sanity, but after witnessing Anduin's techniques, he was terrified. Everyone who had been dragged into the bathroom by Anduin emerged with a demented look, and Karkaroff had imagined dozens of gruesome punishments in his mind. It's no wonder he thought so. Besides using legilimency and veritaserum on these Death Eaters, Anduin had also roughly modified parts of their short-term memory. End of this chapter. Chapter 164, Karkaroff. When Karkaroff was dragged into the bathroom and the gag was removed, he immediately began to beg for mercy. "Please, don't torture me. I surrender. I'm not with them. I swear." Karkaroff pleaded, tears streaming down his face, his voice trembling. Looking at the bearded man with a rough face, Anduin couldn't help but find the situation a bit amusing. "Surrendering isn't impossible, but I don't accept worthless people. What use are you to me?" Anduin asked teasingly. Seeing that the cold, indifferent boy had finally spoken, Karkaroff quickly replied, "I can be useful. I can help you with anything, even killing people. Although I've never done it myself, I know a lot of things and can give you advice." "What do you know?" Anduin raised an eyebrow, clearly more interested in the information Karkaroff might have. "I'll tell you everything you want to know," Karkaroff said obsequiously. "Just ask about the Death Eaters, and I'll tell you something you don't know." Anduin took out a slate and said calmly, "All right, tell me about the Death Eaters." "I know the identities of many Death Eaters," Karkaroff began, swallowing nervously, "including some with hidden identities, like Severus Snape. He's a Death Eater and is currently at Hogwarts as a professor. He's an important person and a close confidant of the Dark Lord." Anduin glanced at Karkaroff with some dissatisfaction. "I already know about Snape. I've even fought him. Tell me something I don't know." Karkaroff noticed Anduin's dissatisfaction and quickly added, "There's also Barty Crouch Jr. He's the son of the current director of the Department of Law Enforcement, and his identity is very well hidden." Hearing this, Anduin's expression grew even more dissatisfied. "You're just spouting nonsense," he said, grabbing Karkaroff's collar and preparing to use legilimency. "Wait!" Karkaroff yelled. "I know Torquil Travers' secret." Anduin paused. "Go on." "In this house, Torquil has a basement. I saw it once, and it's heavily protected. There must be something important hidden there," Karkaroff said, his voice trembling. Anduin felt a headache coming on from Karkaroff's incoherent explanation, but he managed to piece it together. "You mean you found a basement in this house and suspect there's a secret hidden there?" he asked. "Yes," Karkaroff nodded. This was strange. Anduin hadn't seen any relevant memories in Torquil's mind before. Could it be hidden under a protective spell? There might really be something valuable there. "All right, let's go check it out. But first, eat this," Anduin said, taking out a small pill that looked like a mix of metal and wood. "What is this?" Karkaroff asked, fear evident in his eyes. "Stop talking nonsense," Anduin said, forcing the pill into Karkaroff's mouth. After swallowing the pill, Karkaroff felt nauseated. It seemed to come alive in his stomach, stretching out like roots and penetrating deeply into his stomach wall. A sharp pain shot through his abdomen, and he rolled on the floor in agony, sweating profusely. "If you dare to betray me or disobey," Anduin said, extending his right fist and making a spreading motion, "I'll just snap my fingers and you'll be hit by the Thunderbolt explosion spell. Boom, understand?" Karkaroff's face twisted in bitterness as he looked at Anduin with a mix of fear and resignation. He nodded helplessly, realizing he had no escape. His life and death were now in the hands of this demon. Seeing that Karkaroff was completely subdued, Anduin generously undid the binding spell. Karkaroff, regaining his ability to move, stood up trembling, clutching his stomach with one hand. He stood beside Anduin, his demeanor humble and submissive. "Take me to the entrance to the basement," Anduin commanded. He intended to follow Karkaroff to assess the situation. If he couldn't open the entrance, he would wake Torquil and force him to release the protection. "Yes, master," Karkaroff replied quickly, accepting his role. He led Anduin to the first floor. "Is this it?" Anduin asked, a ball of light hovering above his head, illuminating the smooth wall beside the staircase. "That's right. I saw Torquil open a trap here, revealing a small door in the staircase wall. He then entered through it," Karkaroff explained, pointing to the stone wall beneath the stairs. "Okay, wait here," Anduin instructed. He retrieved the hammer without injury from his belongings and struck the triangular wall with a resounding bang. Karkaroff watched in confusion. What was this little devil planning? Was he going to smash the wall open? Before he could ponder further, the wall reacted. Magic lines began to appear where the hammer had struck, glowing faintly in the darkness. After a few more strikes, the entire set of magic patterns on the wall was revealed. Anduin leaned in, studying them attentively. The main spell is Tong Tong Protection, with additional spells like Anti-Apparition, Safeguarding, Shielding Curse, and Cipher Curse. No ordinary wizard could break this, Anduin noted, nodding in approval of the complex runes. However, this was not a problem for him. Anduin pulled out his wand and tapped a few magic nodes on the lines. The magic patterns quickly dimmed, and the stone wall began to shift, revealing a small door just over a meter high. Anduin summoned a ball of light and directed it into the dark doorway. A downward stone staircase became visible, though the basement below remained shrouded in darkness. End of this chapter. Chapter 165, The Safe House. Seeing this, Anduin glanced cautiously at Karkaroff and then gestured towards the door with a nod. The meaning was clear. You go ahead and lead the way. Karkaroff's face twisted into a look of consternation. Regardless of which side he was on, he always seemed to get stuck with the dangerous tasks. When Karkaroff hesitated for too long, Anduin glared at him again. Reluctantly, Karkaroff lowered his head and stepped into the doorway, moving down the stairs cautiously. Be quicker. Isn't my ball of light illuminating the way for you? Can't you see? Anduin scolded impatiently. Startled by Anduin's voice, Karkaroff quickened his pace. How is it? Any traps down there? Anduin called out from beside the small door. No danger at the moment, master. It looks like an ordinary basement, Karkaroff's voice echoed faintly. Hearing Karkaroff's tone, Anduin felt reassured and followed him down the stairs. Once in the basement, Anduin summoned several balls of light, scattering them around to brighten the space. The basement was vast, roughly equivalent to the area of the first floor. Half of it was a warehouse without partition walls, while the other side contained several rooms. The floor was made of thick, flat stones, and the air carried a dry, clean scent reminiscent of a hospital, minus the smell of alcohol. There were more than a dozen rows of shelves in the warehouse section. After a quick survey, Anduin found them stocked with alcohol, drinks, and non-perishable food items. There were several pieces of Teppo warthog ham, ordinary pork ham, bundles of sausages, rows of bacon, cheese, and various canned goods. Additionally, some shelves held daily necessities like boxes of candles, oil lamps, dry firewood, pots, and pans. The basement was impeccably dry and tidy, and everything looked new and well preserved. Goodness, these supplies could sustain a person for years. This alone is quite a haul, Anduin thought excitedly as he moved to inspect the next room. One room was a kitchen, fully equipped with appliances and even an air vent to exhaust fumes. Another room was a bathroom, kept so clean it seemed unused. The last room was a bedroom, with a fireplace at the entrance. The fireplace was clean, with no soot, indicating it had never been used. Beside the fireplace was a bed, and several large wooden cabinets filled with sheets, quilts, and spare clothes. Against one wall were bookshelves, mostly empty, except for a few dozen common books and some newspapers. In the middle of the bookshelf was a large bookcase facing outwards. A solid wood desk stood nearby, covered with various stationery items, including 2 stacks of parchment paper. There was also a wine cabinet and counter beside the desk, though they were empty now, giving the room an aristocratic feel. It seems this basement is a safe house prepared by the Tefros family. One could live here for 3 to 5, even 7 years. It's almost like they were preparing for the end of the world. Anduin mused silently as he surveyed the room. After thoroughly searching the bedroom, Anduin made another discovery. Below the inner side of the desk were many drawers and cabinets. Opening one of the cabinet doors, he found a small safe inside. The safe was unlike the combination safes found in Muggle society. There was no combination wheel or anything of the sort, just a single handle with the rest of the surface bare. Anduin placed his hand on the lockbox and carefully sensed it for a moment. Indeed, there was a faint fluctuation of magical power. It seemed to be a magic safe. Seeing this, Anduin decided to employ an old trick. He took out his invulnerable hammer and began to strike the safe. After a while, a corresponding spell pattern appeared on it. Observing the intricate magic pattern, Anduin frowned. The protective magic on this safe was far more complex than the charm at the entrance. It was a veritable hodgepodge of protective spells, including explosion-proof, antivirus, waterproof, and anti-magic enchantments. It's not impossible to crack it completely, but there's obviously not enough time. There's only 1 hour left until dawn, and we still need time to set up the scene, Anduin thought, feeling a pang of worry. Just as he was about to give up, he noticed something. Carefully examining a few details on the magic pattern, his eyes lit up with realization. This is actually a bloodline-activated safe. Only someone with a specific bloodline can open it. If that's the case, then there's a way, Anduin said, standing up. He took out a small syringe from his belongings and tossed it to Karkaroff. Go and draw some blood from Torquil. You should know how to use this. Yes, I know, Master, Karkaroff replied, taking the syringe. He thought to himself, I didn't know how to use it at first, but after you used it on a few of us, I learned quickly enough. He glanced at the syringe in his hand and cursed silently. Hurry up, Anduin urged, ignoring Karkaroff's thoughts. Yes, Master, Karkaroff responded, hurrying upstairs. The 4 people lying on the second floor were still unconscious, some from unbearable mental stimulation, others from pain, and some from sheer exhaustion after being tortured. Karkaroff glanced at their miserable conditions and couldn't bear to look directly at them. Swallowing hard, he quickly drew a tube of blood and ran back downstairs. After receiving the blood sample, Anduin smeared some of it on the safe, then pulled out his wand and silently recited a spell. Slowly, the blood on the wall of the box seeped into the safe, and with a click, the door opened. Very good. After learning blood magic for half a year, I didn't expect it could be used for lockpicking as well as assisting alchemy, Anduin muttered, gently opening the door of the box. The safe was divided into 2 layers. The upper layer was almost empty, containing only a key and a piece of paper. End of this chapter. Chapter 166, Land Deed and Keys. On the lower floor, a row of gold galleons was neatly stacked. After Anduin took them out, he carefully counted them. There were a total of 1,000 gold galleons. Goodness, I managed to get 1,600 gold galleons tonight alone. That's quite a haul, Anduin thought, a smile playing on his lips as he placed the gold coins into his space purse. Next, he took out the key and a piece of paper from the upper layer and began to study them. He set the key aside and first examined the paper. As he read it, his eyes lit up with joy. It was a land deed for a property in Diagon Alley. Moreover, it was an unsigned title deed officially certified by the Ministry of Magic. As long as one held this title deed, the house and the land would be recognized by the Ministry of Magic. I didn't expect the joke I made with Miss Purnell to come true. This is a windfall. No wonder it was so closely guarded. It's actually an unsigned title deed, Anduin mused, amused by the turn of events. Unsigned title deeds were very rare. Anduin had only seen references to them in records of pure-blood wizards. Most properties in the magical world didn't use such things as title deeds. Wizards often found secluded places in the mountains or forests, cast a few shielding spells, or bought and modified Muggle real estate. However, special areas like Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade were different. Properties in these areas had clear records and had to be registered with the Ministry of Magic, which then issued a title deed. The unsigned title deed was even more special. Converting a normal land deed into an unsigned one required very troublesome procedures and had to be approved by a senior official above the director level of the Ministry of Magic and a Wizengamot counselor. Therefore, such title deeds were very rare in the magical world due to their obvious advantages and disadvantages. The advantage of an unsigned title deed was that it was impossible to find out the real owner of the land through any official institution. It did not need to be registered, was very secretive, and was officially protected by the Ministry of Magic. No intrusion was allowed without permission. Even in places with strict real estate records like Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade, such rights were respected. Presumably, the patriarch of the Travers family in the Wizengamot had arranged for this, creating a safe house to protect the family in case they lost power or were targeted by enemies, such as being wanted by the Ministry of Magic. It provided a place to hide that was difficult to trace. This method was second only to using the Fidelius charm. Unlike the complete concealment of the Fidelius charm, this type of real estate focused more on hiding the identity of the owner while still protecting public real estate. It was also easier to buy and sell, making it ideal for secret transactions. Essentially, it converted the assets of a house into a piece of paper. Even if members of the Order of the Phoenix used formal methods, they would likely still be unsure who the house belonged to unless they followed Yaxley. However, the disadvantage of this kind of title deed was also very clear. It was too convenient to transfer. For example, now that Anduin had it, it was naturally transferred to him. Spreading out the title deed, Anduin transmitted magic power to his fingers and swiped them under the title deed. The magic pattern on the title deed flickered for a moment, recording his magic power fluctuations. The transfer of the land was complete, and it was very convenient. Although this kind of unsigned title deed is highly confidential, Anduin thought, trailing off as he considered the implications. It is too easy for ownership to change hands. If it is stolen accidentally, it will be very troublesome. It is better to take the time to go to the Ministry of Magic to convert this title deed into an exclusive one, Anduin decided after closing the title deed. After securing the land deed, he turned his attention to the key. It was brass-colored and small, with 3 circular perforations in the handle. It looked like it could only open a small lock. After fiddling with it for a while, he didn't find anything special about it. There were no magical fluctuations, and the material was identified as ordinary Paris or brass. At a loss, Anduin turned to Karkaroff, holding up the key. "Do you know what this is?" Karkaroff leaned in for a closer look and replied somewhat uncertainly, "It looks a bit like the key to a Gringotts vault." "The vault?" Anduin's eyes lit up. It made sense why the key was kept in such a secure safe. "Yes, it looks like it should be. I had a similar one before," Karkaroff reconfirmed. "Then with this key, you can directly access the corresponding vault?" Anduin asked hastily. "That's not certain," Karkaroff shook his head. "Why?" Anduin frowned slightly. "Master, you may not understand Gringotts' management of bank vaults. Their vaults have different security levels. Ordinary shallow vaults can be entered as long as you have the key. For some vaults, you need to go in person in addition to having the key. You also need to provide a permission certificate issued by the vault owner. The deeper vaults have higher security measures and may not even have keys. You must go there in person and be accompanied by the corresponding goblin administrator to open it," Karkaroff explained in detail. "So, you can't tell what type of vault this key corresponds to just by looking at it," Anduin concluded. "Yes, only Traverse would know for sure. Generally, vaults with keys are relatively shallow. With the power of the Traverse family, it seems unlikely they would need a vault with such low security. They have family treasuries at deeper levels, accessible only to those of the corresponding bloodline. Compared to Gringotts, Traverse prefers to keep things in his own treasury," Karkaroff explained respectfully. "Oh, doesn't Gringotts claim to be the safest place in the wizarding world?" Anduin raised an eyebrow. "Gringotts may be safe, but goblins may not be. Many families with a long history participated in the famous Goblin Rebellion. They have never been able to fully trust goblins, as they were once enemies," Karkaroff said. "Understood. Let's go upstairs," Anduin ordered after listening to the explanation and clearing his mind. "Yes, master," Karkaroff responded obsequiously. After leaving the basement, Anduin recast the spell against the wall, closing the door opening. He also enchanted a protective spell on it, as this would be his territory from now on. Chapter 167, The Big Killer. In the future, Anduin plans to upgrade all the protective magic of this house. The security level of these Death Eaters is too low. Many places have not been taken care of, and there are a lot of loopholes. After finishing in the basement, the two returned to the second floor. The 4 Death Eaters were still unconscious at this moment. It seemed that Anduin's experiment had tormented them a lot. Anduin took out a bottle of potion from his pocket and threw it to Karkaroff. "Go feed Torquil and wake him up," Anduin instructed. Karkaroff nodded respectfully after taking the potion. He then helped Torquil up and poured the potion into his mouth very roughly, as if venting his anger. Cough, cough. Accompanied by a severe cough, Torquil gradually woke up. He felt a terrible pain in his head, as if he had just experienced a nightmare. He remembered being captured by a young wizard still studying at Hogwarts and being tortured, leaving him devastated both physically and mentally. Just when he thought he had woken up from the nightmare, he opened his eyes to see the same young face that looked like a devil. What's going on? Am I still dreaming? Or was everything that happened before real? Torquil's pupils kept shrinking, and his mind kept falling into the self-doubt of dreams and reality. He was on the verge of going mad. Anduin felt a little dissatisfied when he saw Torquil standing there in a daze after waking up. He put on his knuckles and punched him twice. Ah! The pain brought Torquil back to reality. Seeing Anduin raising his hand to punch again, he begged for mercy. Don't hit me, please. Are you awake? Anduin's slow and heavy voice reached Torquil's ears, and Torquil nodded hurriedly. That's good. I woke you up to ask you something. Anduin took out the vault key and asked, Do you recognize this? Torquil looked at the key in Anduin's hand, his expression changing drastically. He looked at the key and then at Anduin's face, asking eagerly, How did you find this? Anduin smiled disdainfully. Do you want to ask me how I opened the basement? Or how I cracked that safe? Hearing Anduin directly reveal the secret of the house, Torquil felt a chill. How could it be possible? Those memories should have been protected by the mental protection spell. It's over. It's over. He found the key. Doesn't that mean the land deed is also confiscated? Torquil suddenly became limp and was about to fall, but Karkaroff, who was next to him, reacted quickly and immediately supported him. Hurry up and answer the master's question, and be honest, Karkaroff sternly shouted at Torquil. Karkaroff, have you betrayed us too? Torquil glanced at the bearded man next to him. His anger overcame his fear for a moment, and he said with a grim face, Wait, when the Dark Lord returns, you will surely suffer and die. Boom. Seeing that Torquil still had the strength to speak harshly, Anduin punched him in the face again, causing Torquil's tears to flow from the pain. Stop talking nonsense. I don't want to waste Veritaserum, and I don't have time to waste it on you, so hurry up. Anduin demanded impatiently, pulling out a bottle of potion, ready to use Veritaserum for torture at any time. This punch dispelled the anger that Torquil had just mentioned. He replied timidly, No, I will talk. Torquil swallowed hard. That's the key to a mid-level vault in Gringotts. What's in the vault? Do you need identification? Anduin continued to ask. That vault doesn't belong to me. It's Yulia's private vault. She needs to be present with the key to open it. Both are indispensable, and the key is unique. There is no way to report the loss, and no proof documents are accepted. Inside, there are. Torquil's expression became a little unnatural, as if there was something unspeakable. But after seeing Anduin pick up his thumb and push off the bottle cap of Veritaserum, as if he was ready to feed him the potion, he continued. He closed his eyes and shouted, It's full of ledgers. Ledgers? And Dewey's? N seemed to have thought of something, but continued to ask, What kind of ledgers? Just some common ledgers for business between families, Torquil replied, avoiding Anduin's gaze. After a night of torture, he was extremely fragile both physically and mentally. The pressure Anduin exerted on him left him with no energy to fabricate lies. Anduin's thoughts raced, and he suddenly had a guess. It's your smuggling ledger, isn't it? Are there records of secret transactions with senior officials of the Ministry of Magic and other families? Perhaps, in addition to your own secret ledgers, there is more evidence of criminal transactions involving other families and high-ranking officials. How do you know? Torquil blurted out, realizing too late that he had been tricked. He clamped his mouth shut. Oh, I'm really curious. How dare you put these things in the vault of Gringotts? Could it be? Anduin's mind flashed with another thought. Is this key part of a deal you plan to make? Torquil didn't dare to answer, but his flickering eyes confirmed Anduin's suspicions. So, who are you planning to make a deal with for this key? Anduin stared into Torquil's eyes and pressed on. Other pure-blood families? A member of the Wizengamot? High officials of the Ministry of Magic? Or Millicent Barnold? At the mention of Millicent Barnold's name, Torquil's pupils contracted violently. Anduin's eyes gleamed with clarity. So, this is the biggest guarantee your family has prepared for itself. On one hand, these secrets can be used to blackmail those families and high-ranking officials who have secret dealings with you. On the other hand, if your family faces a real crisis, this key is the best bargaining chip. It can be used to make deals with those in power and seek political asylum. Am I right? Anduin grinned slowly, mockingly. Through Tokiel's reaction, Anduin's judgment was further confirmed. He had to admit, these pure-blood families with long histories were quite far-sighted. They were prepared for danger, even in times of peace, not only by building a safe house on legal land where no one could investigate, but also by holding on to this kind of political leverage. Compared to the rogue strategy of running away after an incident, this was more like a calculated decision made by these nobles. End of this chapter. Chapter 168, Value Maximization. Then you told the others that you were going to Europe together, but you were deceiving them. With this information, you could save your life if it leaked. Maybe your previous release on bail was also related to these materials? Could it be that Lucius's easy exoneration is not only due to political donations, but also connected to this? He just happens to be Yulia's younger brother, Anduin suddenly realized. After listening to Anduin's series of analyses, Torquil felt his heart tremble. He no longer dared to look at Anduin and could only force himself to maintain an indifferent expression, turning his head to cover up his inner panic. On the other hand, Karkaroff, who was nearby, couldn't contain his anger. You never planned to go into exile with us from the beginning. You intended to stay here and continue being your rich young master, didn't you? So, you've been lying to us all along. You were the first to betray us. Karkaroff's determination to switch sides strengthened. Torquil now wanted to die. Not only had he fallen into the hands of the devil, but the secrets crucial to his family's survival had been exposed. Before yesterday, he was still a carefree nobleman of the Travers family. According to his plan, if he could fool these Death Eaters into exile overseas, and if the Dark Lord returned in the future, he would be hailed as a hero for preserving the organization's strength. If the Dark Lord was truly dead, these wandering Death Eaters could help the family expand overseas, grabbing more rights and wealth for him, and they would have to thank him. But now, not only was he trapped by Anduin, but the mere spread of these secrets would make him the sinner of the entire Travers family. Anduin, however, didn't care about the Travers family's mess. He was more concerned with how much benefit this key could bring him. Keeping the key privately was not reliable. First, a single key couldn't allow him to access the vault's contents. Moreover, the secret itself was more valuable than the key. Even if he could keep these black materials for himself, it would bring him a lot of trouble and attract countless enemies. Compared to the Travers family, how could a Muggle-born wizard like him dare to threaten high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic, Wizangamot counselors, and pure-blood families? Breaking the news would also arouse the resentment of countless people, harming others and himself. He didn't want to die with the Travers family. He hated trouble and wouldn't seek it out. So, should he give the information and the key to Dumbledore or Millicent Barnold? This might be a good choice. With the wise minister's style, he wouldn't be stingy with rewards, but at most, he would give rewards commensurate with the merits. Maybe he would be awarded a medal, and Dumbledore might give him a special contribution award or even a Merlin Knight medal. But what use were so many medals? They couldn't be eaten, and they had no research value. For a moment, several plans flashed through Anduin's mind, all aimed at maximizing the value of this key. Yes, Anduin's eyes suddenly brightened. He glanced at Torquil, who was now sluggish and had completely lost his will to survive. Oh, this plan is very feasible, and it fits perfectly with the later actions. But you have to sacrifice Torquil, Anduin thought with a sneer. Anduin took out his pocket watch and glanced at it. Time was running out, and he had to act quickly. He then took out another pill from his pocket, similar to the one he had fed Karkaroff, but with some differences. He roughly opened Torquil's mouth and stuffed it down. Then Anduin looked at Karkaroff. Later, you have to cooperate with me in acting. Come here and listen, Anduin murmured. Karkaroff leaned in as Anduin whispered something in his ear. Karkaroff's face immediately showed embarrassment, and he hurriedly said, "Master, if I do this, I will be punished by the Ministry of Magic." "Why are you panicking?" Anduin frowned, clearly dissatisfied. "Do as I say, and they will let you go. Or are you still feeling some old loyalty to these Death Eaters and can't bear to betray them?" No, Karkaroff shook his head repeatedly. "I have no sympathy for them. But is this really reliable? If they interrogate these Death Eaters, wouldn't it be? Except for Tokyo, whose brain is protected by a spell, I have already modified the short-term memory of the others. There will be no problem during the interrogation. As for Tokyo, I have leverage over his family. Do you think he dares to say anything? And even if he does, who would believe him? Anduin sneered. Ignoring Karkaroff's conflicted emotions, Anduin calmly commanded him to put away all the on-site test equipment and materials. He also instructed Karkaroff to clean the second floor thoroughly. After a night of chaos, the entire hall on the second floor was covered with a mixture of blood, sweat, and urine, creating a nauseating stench. Despite this, Karkaroff completed the task diligently. At the same time, the wounds and stains on the Death Eaters needed to be addressed. Anduin used a healing spell instead of his usual aggressive methods, fearing that further violence might drive them insane. It took about 10 minutes to clean up the Death Eaters, including Karkaroff. Even the holes in their clothes, caused by the measuring instruments, were repaired. This was also the time he had agreed upon with Shunfeng. Finally, Anduin used the spirit-binding snake to draw about half of the magic power from the Death Eaters. After casting the disillusionment charm on both the Death Eaters and himself, he led them out of the house through the window. In the early morning, in the office of the Auror Command at the British Ministry of Magic, Alastair Moody yawned and put on his clothes, ready to start a day's work. He had no idea which unfortunate dark wizard would fall victim to his killing curse today. As the oldest Auror in the Ministry of Magic, Moody was a well-known workaholic. It was normal for him to not go home for extended periods, often living directly in his office. With his significant authority, he could use many methods that were previously off-limits to deal with Death Eaters and dark wizards, which made him love his job even more. After eating a few bites of dry bread to fill his stomach, Moody prepared to go to the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes to review the briefing. He needed to check for any missed magical monitoring signals above level XXX. End of this chapter. Chapter 169, Class Accident. Just as he opened the door to his office, an owl flew in, dropping a letter accurately into his hands. An owl? Hadn't the Ministry of Magic started using paper airplanes to deliver letters a while ago? Feeling a bit puzzled, Moody opened the brown envelope, took out the letter, and read it. After just a quick glance, his expression became serious. Moody, dragging his prosthetic leg, quickly made his way to the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, kicking open the office door. The staff inside looked up, startled by his sudden entrance and the grave look on his face. "What's the matter, Mr. Moody?" one of the staff members asked. Even among his own people, this senior Auror commanded a certain level of fear and respect. "Quickly, check if there was a high-energy magic wave near Regent's Park in London." Moody barked at the guards in an aggressive tone. The staff on duty shivered from his yelling and immediately began searching the monitoring records. "Yes, not long ago," the on-duty staff member replied apprehensively after seeing the records. "It turned out to be a XXXX-level magic wave. Why didn't you report it? Are you being lazy again? I must hold your boss accountable this time." Moody cursed, stomping his crutches. After listening to the briefing, he immediately confirmed the authenticity of the letter's contents. The staff on duty wore a bitter expression, about to explain something, but Moody cut them off, ordering loudly, "Notify all Aurors to return to the team immediately and inform the striker team to go directly to Regent's Park in London. Put the entire Reversal of Magical Incidents squad on alert and get them to Regent's Park now." With that, Moody rushed to the entrance of the Ministry of Magic. It was troublesome that apparition couldn't be used inside the ministry. The staff in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes knew a major event had occurred and acted hastily. Within moments, dozens of paper airplanes flew out of the office. As soon as Moody exited the Ministry of Magic, he quickly apparated to Regent's Park. The park, not far from Diagon Alley, was still very quiet in the early morning, with no muggles around. However, upon closer inspection, several potholes of different sizes could be seen in an open space in the woods. The trees were either scorched or had fallen to the ground, presenting a scene of chaos. It was evident that a fierce battle had just taken place here. Moody, who had just apparated, quickly assessed the scene. The intensity of the battle seemed to exceed his imagination. He could see traces of many powerful spells with his naked eyes, such as Thunderbolt Explosion, Repelling Curse, Freezing Curse, Cutting Curse, and Burning Flame. After taking out his wand and carefully examining the forest, his left magical eye seemed to find something. Looking at a specific spot in the open space, he tentatively called out, "Anduin?" "It's me, Mr. Moody," came the reply. As soon as the words fell, the space in the open area shifted, and a black-haired boy walked out. The young man looked very disheveled, his clothes, face, and hair covered with dust and blood. He was pressing his right hand tightly against his left arm, indicating a serious injury. Seeing this, Moody hurried forward, took out a bottle of potion from his pocket, gently supported Anduin's back, and slowly poured the potion into his mouth. Anduin coughed twice as he drank. "Drink slowly, child. The rescuers will be here soon." "Drink some tonic first. Are you okay? Is the injury serious?" Moody, usually fierce, spoke to Anduin in a calm tone. After drinking the potion, Anduin's condition seemed to stabilize a bit. Anduin's slightly pale face gradually regained some color. "It's okay. I just suffered some minor injuries. My magic power is overconsumed, and I'm a little tired," he said, his face showing signs of fatigue. He wasn't lying about being tired. After all, he hadn't slept all night. "Where are the Death Eaters who attacked you?" Moody asked, relieved to see Anduin in good condition. "After I knocked down a few of them in the previous attack, I was afraid of being seen by muggles, so I used a shielding spell to hide them. I'll undo the spell now." Anduin took out his wand and pointed it at the open space behind him. Suddenly, 5 figures appeared in the previously empty area. It was Torquil and the others, including Karkaroff, all looking unconscious. "This!" Moody exclaimed. He had noticed something strange through his magical eye earlier and had guessed that Anduin had cast a spell to hide himself. However, he hadn't expected the Death Eaters to be hidden as well. "This is Torquil Travers, and there's Goyle, Crabbe, and Karkaroff, who have been at large. This young man is Yaxley, whom Dumbledore warned me about. I didn't expect them all to be here." Moody stepped forward to check their status and found that they had been stunned by the stunning curse. He looked at Anduin in surprise and asked curiously, "In the letter you sent me earlier, you only mentioned that you were attacked by Death Eaters. Why are they all unconscious? Did you do this?" "That's right. These Death Eaters are really difficult to deal with," Anduin said, looking as if he had narrowly escaped death. "I still don't understand how they found you, and why were you here so early in the morning? How did you manage to notify me so quickly?" Moody asked, puzzled. He didn't doubt Anduin, but the incident had happened too suddenly, and there were many details that needed explanation. "Well, here's what happened." Anduin began to recount the events leading up to the attack. "I came to Diagon Alley yesterday to buy some gifts for Augusta and Neville. I happened to see Tom, the owner of the Leaky Cauldron, whom I haven't seen in a long time. You should know him." "Yes, I remember. You lived there for a long time before entering Hogwarts," Moody replied after a moment of thought. "That's right. Tom and I are old friends, and since I hadn't seen him in a while, I decided to stay with him for the night to catch up. I sent a letter to Augusta to inform her, and she replied using my owl. So I didn't let my owl go back. I had dinner with Tom and my owl, Tailwind, at the Leaky Cauldron that night, and many people saw us together." End of this chapter. Chapter 170. You Are Too Kind. I usually have the habit of exercising in the morning, and it has been going on for many years. Since there's a park near Diagon Alley, I decided to come here to exercise early in the morning and let my owl out, Anduin explained. "Then you met Death Eaters? Why are they targeting you?" Moody asked, puzzled as to why several Death Eaters would attack a young wizard so early in the morning. "That's right. When I arrived at Regent's Park and was about to warm up, I found myself surrounded by Death Eaters. As for why they attacked me," Anduin paused, pondering for a moment. "At Hogwarts, I had trouble with Yaxley and Travers. Plus, I'm the only Muggle-born wizard in Slytherin, and they all hate me. I think that's the reason." "That doesn't make sense. If it's just friction between students, is it necessary to gather 5 Death Eaters to attack you? And judging by the damage around, it's obvious they wanted to kill you." Moody frowned, puzzled. Are the students in the school so angry now? He looked at Anduin with some confusion. Seeing Moody's question, Anduin hesitated, then finally gritted his teeth as if making an important decision. He looked at Moody seriously. They actually caused trouble for me more than once at school. Although I managed to fend them off, they still held a grudge. Just before Christmas, Yaxley gathered some pure-blooded wizards to try to attack me outside the school. But I got away and... Anduin took a serious look at Moody. During that attack, Yaxley tried to use the killing curse on me. What? Moody's face instantly became fierce, and he looked at Anduin seriously. Are you sure? Yes, Principal Dumbledore should know about what happened that day, or at least have some suspicions. After that Christmas, Yaxley never showed up at Hogwarts again. Anduin sighed, subtly shifting the blame to Dumbledore. From Moody's reaction, he could tell that the rest of the Order of the Phoenix probably didn't know about Yaxley's criminal record. So that's it. Then everything makes sense. I wondered why Dumbledore would suddenly ask us to find Yaxley's whereabouts and waste manpower to monitor a house with no information. If they really hid in that house, it would be possible to find you coming to Diagon Alley, Moody said, enlightened. But then he looked at Anduin sternly. Why didn't you inform us of this earlier? Letting an unscrupulous Death Eater wander freely is a huge risk. Sorry, it's my fault. Yaxley, after all, he is my senior, the prefect of Slytherin. I really couldn't bear to. Anduin apologized sincerely with a remorseful expression. Humph, you are too kind. You must not hesitate in the face of these bastards. See what you got for letting him go? Deep-seated hatred and endless attacks. Moody reprimanded Anduin, who maintained a terrified expression. Moody continued to scold the Death Eaters for a while. Seeing the young Anduin bowing his head and humbly listening, he felt he might have gone too far. Anduin was still a child, and he had just fought desperately against 5 Death Eaters alone. Thinking of this, Moody's curiosity was piqued again. You said you were surrounded by 5 Death Eaters. How did you manage to defeat them? These guys are not easy to deal with. They are all vicious gangsters, Moody asked. This is all thanks to the teachings of Professor Flitwick and Professor Burns, plus a little bit of luck, Anduin said, taking a deep breath with lingering fear. At that time, Thanks to my owl's excellent night vision and our long-term understanding, it spotted clues from the sky and warned me in advance. Otherwise, I would have been in serious danger. After Tailwind alerted me, I immediately pinpointed the enemy's position using the Echo Charm. The Echo Charm is a new spell jointly developed by Professor Burns and me during his tenure. Yes, I've read your thesis. Edgar even showed off his monocle at the Order of the Phoenix gathering, Moody recalled, his expression souring at the memory of Burns's smug face. He then asked curiously, and then? Once I discovered the enemy's location, I knew I had to act quickly because time was not on my side. I cast an illusion spell on myself and simultaneously released the dazzling charm. It was dark, and the sudden bright lights disrupted their vision. Dazzling charm? What's that? Moody asked, puzzled. Anduin took a button from his coat and said, I'll show you. He infused the button with magic and threw it into the air. A bright light flashed, even though it was already daylight. Moody was momentarily stunned and couldn't help but marvel. Is this an alchemy tool you made? Yes, it's an optimized spell I developed after improving the glowing runes, Anduin explained. The effect was even better at night. It lasted for a few seconds, which gave me enough time to break out of the encirclement. I knocked Yaxley down with a spell and used him as a shield to fend off the others' attacks. Good job, quick thinking, and a sound strategy, Moody praised, motioning for Anduin to continue. After they regained their sight, they attacked me, not caring about Yaxley's life. He was hit by several spells from his own comrades. Realizing that taking hostages was futile, I used the levitation spell to throw Yaxley at them. Then, I used the ground curse technique to launch a sneak attack, knocking down another enemy, the fat man over there. Anduin pointed to one of the Death Eaters. The reason I used Yaxley as a shield was mainly because he had been tortured so badly that he was mentally unstable. If questioned later, I could easily blame his condition on the attacks from his accomplices. End of this chapter. Chapter 171. Advertising. The reason why Yaxley was used as a shield was mainly because he had been tortured so badly that he even had problems with his mind. If he really went crazy, he would just blame his accomplices for attacking him. That's Crab. This kid is ignorant, a piece of trash with so much flesh for nothing. But you did it beautifully, Anduin. You even managed to stick the Earth Curse. This skill, among the techniques in Finkley, is the most testing of manipulative ability, Moody said, listening with relish and admiring Anduin's on-the-spot reaction and technique. After Anduin nodded modestly, he continued, "You were too much. After knocking down 2 people, I quickly used cloud and mist to disturb their sight, but the remaining 3 reacted very quickly. One of them decisively used the hurricane curse to disperse the fog, and the other 2 continued to use the powerful explosion curse and fire curse to attack me." Anduin pointed to the direction indicated by Moody, and sure enough, there were many large pits created by the spells. "Then how did you solve it?" Moody asked, recalling the scene in his mind. Standing in Anduin's position at that time was extremely dangerous, and he couldn't help but feel nervous. "Thanks to my phase shoes and protection ring," Anduin said, showing Moody his ring and shoes. "At that time, with the help of the Echo spell, I could detect that the other party was casting a spell on me, so I immediately activated the acceleration function of the prop shoes to move to one side, and at the same time propped up the iron armor curse with the protective ring to block the aftermath caused by the explosion. I even approached a Death Eater in the chaos and cast a spell close to him to knock him down." Anduin pointed to Karkaroff and activated the protective ring. A shield-like, arc-shaped protective cover spread from the ring on his left hand, almost protecting most of him. "I can't tell, Anduin. You have a lot of good things," Moody praised with a smile. "You flatter me," Anduin replied shyly, continuing, "At that time, there were only 2 people left, but their attacks became more and more unscrupulous. They even used the unforgivable curse on me many times. I had to use the flexibility of the phase shoes to dodge multiple times." Anduin told the truth about the unforgivable curse. When he was arranging the scene, he ordered Karkaroff to use the wands of the rest of the people to cast various spells, including many unforgivable curses, to check for flashback spells. "Then how did you solve those 2 people in the end?" Moody asked curiously. "That's thanks to the sonic boom charm. I relied on it to stun the 2 of them instantly, and then I was able to defeat them one by one and knock them down. You know what happened after that. I sent the owl to you as soon as possible, telling you to come here quickly," Anduin said as he took another button off his body. "Another one? Is there an arsenal on you? Why do you have so many magic items for battle?" Moody took the spell from Anduin's hand, input a bit of magic power, and then threw it far away. His head was dizzy, and it took him a while to wake up. Seeing Moody's embarrassed look, Anduin smiled slightly and explained, "Ever since I learned alchemy from Professor Burns, I have fallen in love with this art deeply. So, I have been obsessed with making alchemy props. Maybe I will open an alchemy shop in the future. These props might be the future flagship products. How about it? Do you like them?" It turned out that Anduin had been talking nonsense with Moody for a long time, explaining the details of the battle and demonstrating the alchemy props, all as a form of advertising in advance. He had just acquired a house in Diagon Alley, and it would be too wasteful not to use it, so he tried his best to show the products to Moody, paving the way for his future alchemy business. "I like them. These small props are much more practical than looking glasses," Moody said, clearly impressed. "When you decide to sell these props, please let me know in advance. I will definitely pre-order them." Moody exclaimed, clearly dazzled by Anduin's series of alchemical creations. "Don't worry, I'll give you a trial copy first," Anduin replied with a smile. "And I'm developing a new item recently. I'm planning to call it Forbidden Handcuffs. They continuously extract the prisoner's magic power. When you catch a dark wizard, put these on him, and he won't be able to escape." "Really?" Moody's interest piqued even further. He immediately started a heated discussion with Anduin. Through their conversation, Anduin learned about the daily work and missions of Auror's and Ministry of Magic staff. Moody described the frequent delays in arriving at accident scenes, the lack of effective tracking methods for dark wizards, miscommunications during attacks and arrests, and the absence of reliable detection techniques. Listening to a senior Auror's experiences, Anduin gained valuable insights into the challenges these battle wizards faced daily. This knowledge opened up many ideas for Anduin to develop future alchemical props, helping him determine his research direction and goals. Just as their conversation was in full swing, a constant buzzing sound filled the air. Someone was apparating. It seemed that Ministry of Magic personnel had arrived. The assailants, who appeared one after another, only knew that Moody had urgently summoned them. They were unaware of the specific mission and assumed they were there to provide support. What greeted them was a field ravaged by magical spells. They raised their wands, pointing them at Anduin, the tips glowing with accumulating magic, ready for a fight. "What are you doing? Put down your wands? Do you know who you're pointing at? This is a hero who defeated 5 Death Eaters." Moody's face changed instantly as he growled fiercely at the assailants. The strikers, reprimanded by their boss as soon as they landed, looked at each other in embarrassment before lowering their wands. They approached to inspect the scene and found 5 unconscious Death Eaters. One of the strikers glanced at Anduin, then at the Death Eaters on the ground, and asked in disbelief, "Mr. Moody, are you saying that this kid took care of all these Death Eaters? How is this possible?" "I can testify to this," Moody shouted again. "I've already understood all the details of the battle that broke out between Anduin and the Death Eaters here. There's no need to question it." End of this chapter. Chapter 172, The Ministry of Magic. After listening to Anduin's recounting of the battle, Moody no longer doubted Anduin's ability to defeat the Death Eaters. Instead, he became more interested in Anduin's impressive equipment. After scolding his subordinates, Moody addressed them again. "What are you standing around for? Take care of the prisoners and secure the scene. Can't you see the mess here? Set up Muggle-repelling charms and shielding spell barriers immediately. We need to wait for the reversal of Accidental Magic Incident Team to handle this." Many of the Aurors had just been roused from their beds and were initially disoriented upon arriving at the scene. Moody's stern commands quickly snapped them into action. Soon, a barrier composed of Muggle-repelling charms and shielding spells enveloped the area. Despite the initial confusion, these Aurors proved to be quite reliable in terms of their fighting spirit and professionalism. Anduin observed them and formed a basic judgment of their capabilities. "Anduin, let me take you to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. You've just been through a major battle, and it's best to get checked out. Don't worry about the medical expenses. We'll cover them," Moody said to Anduin in a softer tone, though his expression remained fierce. Moody's ability to intimidate was unmatched, but Anduin managed to control his emotions and replied calmly, "It's okay, Moody. I know my condition well. Have you forgotten that I know alchemy? I have a set of tools for self-diagnosis." Anduin then took out a pocket watch, turned it to the back, pressed a switch, and opened a cover. Inside, the watch displayed 4 90-degree fan-shaped sections, each in red, yellow, blue, and green, with circular scales radiating outward. A full red section indicates no blood loss and intact muscles. A full yellow section means no bone damage. A full blue section shows normal body temperature and no dehydration. A full green section confirms no symptoms of poisoning, Anduin explained to Moody. "My God, how many useful gadgets do you have? Will you sell this in the future?" Moody asked, clearly impressed by Anduin's ingenuity. "This device isn't entirely reliable. It can be fooled by shielding spells or confundus charms. I made it for fun, but if there's a market, I wouldn't mind mass-producing and selling it," Anduin shrugged. "Haha, if you do decide to sell it, save one for me." "I always seem to forget if I've broken another bone," Moody joked darkly. Soon, the wizards from the Reversal of Accidental Magic Incident Team arrived. After assessing the situation, they couldn't help but glance at Anduin with admiration. Capturing 5 Death Eaters at once was a rare feat. The team quickly took over the scene, restoring the area and searching for Muggles who might have witnessed the incident. Once the Aurors handed over the scene, they regrouped around Moody. "Since you don't want to go to the hospital, come with me back to the Ministry of Magic. We need to take your statement and compile a report. Besides, you've done an outstanding job." Minister Barnold may want to see you, Moody suggested to Anduin, preparing to take the prisoners back to the ministry. All right, Anduin replied. He then took out the confiscated wands and handed them to Moody. Leaning in, he whispered a few words into Moody's ear and pointed towards the prisoners. Thomas lay on the ground, defeated. After listening to Anduin's words, Moody raised an eyebrow, rolled his eyes, and said with a smile, "It makes sense. Don't worry, I'll keep a close watch on this guy and make sure they don't get a chance to touch him. This time, we have a chance to wipe out the Travers family." All right, team, wrap it up. You are responsible for escorting the prisoners back to the Ministry of Magic. Isolate them, and without my order, no one is allowed to visit, not even the ministers of various departments, Moody commanded calmly. He then turned to Anduin. Help me out here. Let's head back to the Ministry of Magic. As you wish, Anduin Rep lied with a smile. He supported Moody's shoulders, and together with a group of strikers, they apparated, disappearing from the scene. When Anduin's vision cleared, they were standing in a long, resplendent hall. The polished, dark wooden floor gleamed under the light, and the peacock blue ceiling was inlaid with glittering golden symbols that constantly moved and changed, resembling a huge high-altitude bulletin board. Gilded fireplaces lined both sides of the hall, and in the center stood a fountain adorned with solid gold statues of wizards, witches, centaurs, goblins, and house elves, with jets of water shooting from various parts of the sculptures. Due to Moody's notice, many Ministry of Magic employees emerged from the fireplaces on the left. The appearance of Anduin and the group of strikers immediately drew their attention. When they saw the captured Death Eaters, exclamations filled the hall. The strikers, responsible for the detention, looked indifferent and focused straight ahead, ignoring the admiration of the onlookers. However, their puffed chests and slightly raised chins betrayed their pride, as if they alone had captured the prisoners. "Hurry up! What are you pretending for? What does the arrest of these Death Eaters have to do with you?" Moody barked, driving the group of strikers away. Embarrassed, the strikers lowered their heads and quickly dragged the Death Eaters forward, not daring to delay any longer. The wizards nearby grew more curious, whispering excitedly and trying to get a better look. 5 Death Eaters had been arrested? The onlookers buzzed with excitement, and many noticed Anduin, though none suspected him. After reprimanding the strikers, Moody turned to Anduin and explained, "This must be your first visit to the Ministry of Magic. This is the reception hall. Beyond the security check counter ahead, apparition is not allowed, so we'll have to walk the rest of the way." End of this chapter. Chapter 173, Big Trouble. Anduin nodded with a smile when he heard the words and looked around curiously. He noticed a few wizards who were constantly spying on the captured Death Eaters. Their faces changed drastically, as if they had discovered something, and then they quietly left the scene through the fireplace on the right side of the hall. Anduin, who observed this, sneered. "Did you find out? If you did, act quickly. Don't make me wait too long," he thought. Moody, who was beside him, didn't notice Anduin's expression. He led him into the elevator and began introducing him to the Ministry of Magic with great interest. We are now on the 8th floor of the basement. Each floor above us houses a different department. The 7th floor is the Department of Magical Games and Sports. The 6th floor is the Department of Magical Transportation. The 5th floor is the Department of International Magical Cooperation. The 4th floor is the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. The 3rd floor is the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, and our destination is the Department of Magical Law Enforcement on the 2nd floor. If you really plan to do business in alchemical props in the future, remember to get a certificate from the Department of International Magical Cooperation in advance. All business transactions in the magical world must comply with the International Magic Trade Standard Code. Otherwise, it will be considered smuggling. Understand? Moody kindly reminded him. Understood, Anduin nodded in response. He then asked curiously, "Why are the wizarding world's requirements for doing business so complicated? It's actually not that bad if the business is domestic, but cross-border business is more troublesome. This is mainly to protect the interests of wizards from various countries." The rules of the Ministry of Magic in each country are different. In some places, they are not so strict. The UK is too close to the European continent, and it is easy to be impacted by overseas products if you are not careful. For example, the magic carpet, which is the most important flying equipment in many countries, became popular in our country some time ago. But to protect our local broom industry, we strictly controlled the trading of magic carpets. You probably won't see that thing for a while. So is it because of the fear that the trade deficit will cause the loss of state-owned property? Anduin pondered. The British Ministry of Magic seems to be using a one-size-fits-all policy and directly prohibits it. I rarely see products from the foreign magical world being sold in the country. Will there be a lot of smugglers? Anduin asked curiously, suddenly thinking of something. Not just a lot. The main task of our aurors in the past was to cooperate with the Department of International Magical Cooperation and the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures to combat smuggling. A large number of magical materials and magical animals were smuggled abroad, and of course, many were smuggled into the country, Moody said, with a hint of resentment. A lot of these businesses involve pure-blood families, but unfortunately, all we caught were small fry. Those big families did a good job of keeping secrets, and it was difficult to collect evidence. Oh? Anduin thought, realizing that the key in his hand might be more valuable than he had imagined. Anduin continued to ask Moody a lot of relevant information on the sidelines. Moody, in a good mood and with a favorable impression of Anduin, shared many inside stories with him. After taking the elevator to the second basement floor, Moody first took him to a room that looked like a lounge and asked him to rest for a while. Moody had to put those Death Eaters in prison first. Due to Anduin's advance reminder, Moody knew the value of these prisoners, especially Torquil, who had once been exonerated because of his elder brother in the Wizengamot, but was now captured. He is a Death Eater. His identity is already hard evidence. His elder brother once vouched for him, and now that the matter is revealed, it will be a huge scandal. This will inevitably discredit the dignity of the Travers family and even threaten Torquil's elder brother's position as a member of the council. In other words, with Torquil exposed, Minister Barnold will have the opportunity to kick the Travers family out of the Wizengamot. Those who are close to the Travers family will also be restrained, allowing Minister Barnold's dominant Death Eater clearing policy to advance further. Moody has already made plans to take care of Torquil personally and protect him. He is just a baby now. Seeing that the situation is not good, those guys may secretly murder him. Moody is worried about handing him over to others. No one knows if there are any Death Eaters lurking in the Ministry of Magic or any insiders from the Travers family. You take a good rest here. You must be exhausted. I will remind them not to disturb you. Relax and sleep. If you need anything, ask them. If you are hungry or thirsty, there is food in the cabinet. When you feel better, come find me at Auror Command, and I'll take you to see Minister Barnold later. Originally, Anduin, as a battle hero, should have been interviewed immediately, but it is still early, and most of the Ministry of Magic employees are not at work. Moody can see that Anduin is not in good spirits, probably because of the previous battle. He was exhausted, so he was arranged in the VIP lounge. Meanwhile, Moody was so busy dealing with those Death Eaters that he couldn't let them out of his sight right now. Okay, if there is anything, I will come to you. Don't worry, Anduin smiled. After Moody left, Anduin finally couldn't help stretching his waist. He was exhausted from the intense experiments that night. But it's not time to rest yet, he muttered. He took out his pocket watch to check the time and smiled coldly. There will be distinguished guests coming later, but there is not much time left for you, so you have to seize it. Anduin used a spell to tidy up his appearance, went to the cupboard next to him, poured himself a drink, added some ice cubes, and then lay down on the sofa, as if waiting for someone. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Anduin refilled his drink, there was a knock on the door of the VIP room. Pretty quick. It's only been less than half an hour, Anduin murmured, then replied loudly, Please come in. After getting permission, a woman in pink overalls walked into the lounge, her smile making Anduin feel uneasy. You must be Mr. Anduin Wilson. I'm Dolores Umbridge, the senior secretary of the Wizengamot Council. Nice to meet you, Umbridge said, her voice filled with pride. It's a pleasure to meet you, Anduin replied, not even bothering to get up, and took a sip of his drink. Oh, Anduin, don't you mind if I call you that? Umbridge asked, a hint of dissatisfaction in her voice, though she still smiled. Anduin raised his eyebrows non-committally, but didn't answer. Anduin, I'm here to tell you that you've got yourself in big trouble, she declared. End of this chapter. Chapter 174, The Lobbyist. Umbridge's expression shifted rapidly. Initially she wore a smile, but it quickly turned serious. She stared intently at Anduin, as if trying to detect any signs of nervousness or fear in his demeanor. However, Anduin remained composed, his expression indifferent. He gently set down the glass in his hand and responded lightly. Oh? Not bad. Umbridge walked to the sofa opposite Anduin and sat down, raising her chin with a serious air. This morning, 2 hours ago, you were involved in a fight in Regent's Park, 2 miles away from Diagon Alley. Am I wrong? So? Anduin wondered what Umbridge was getting at. There's nothing wrong with that? Don't you realize you've gotten yourself into big trouble? You've seriously violated the secrecy law. The Act on Reasonable Restraint of Underage Wizards strictly prohibits underage wizards from using magic outside of school, Umbridge threatened arrogantly. Anduin raised an eyebrow. Did this fool really think he was a child, or was she trying to bully him into thinking he didn't know the secrecy law? Using such low-level tactics to scare people was laughable. What should he do with her? Unaware of Anduin's thoughts, Umbridge continued, the law strictly stipulates that intentionally and knowingly using magic in a Muggle-inhabited area is a crime. You are not just casting spells off campus without reason. You are suspected of intentionally using a dangerous spell, which is a felony. Did she really omit the part about casting spells in front of Muggles? Her acting was truly poor. How could they send such a person to be a lobbyist? Anduin's thoughts began to drift. Umbridge, still staring sharply at Anduin, continued her half-threatening, half-comforting act. You are in a difficult situation. If found guilty by the Wizengamot, you could be imprisoned in Azkaban. But you are fortunate to have met me. With my help, you can get through this smoothly. As long as you don't admit that those people were attacking you, I can intercede on your behalf. Just say you were not among the casters today, and you won't have to. Anduin couldn't hold back any longer and burst out laughing. The aunt's performance was simply too amusing. Seeing Anduin laughing so freely, Umbridge's anger flared. She stood up, her expression ferocious, and shouted in a shrill voice, Mr. Wilson, I came here with good intentions to help you solve your trouble, and I didn't expect you to be so ungrateful. Heh? Anduin sneered, then pulled off his coat, revealing the Medal of Bravery on his chest. I think you're the one who doesn't know what's good for you. You came here trying to trick someone who once assisted the Ministry of Magic in catching Death Eaters and has won the Silver Medal of Courage. Cast spells outside of school? Believe it or not, if I cast spells in front of you and beat you up, Minister Barnold would still reward me. Anduin stood up abruptly, his gaze fierce. Magic power surged around him, causing the furniture in the room to creak under the pressure. Umbridge felt as if she were wrapped in a massive force, making it hard to breathe. She grew increasingly nervous. Why didn't this kid play by the rules? He acted as soon as he spoke. Despite her fear, she screamed stubbornly, You are so bold. How dare you? How dare you take action against an official of the Ministry of Magic? Anduin completely ignored her yelling. With strong magic, he gently lifted the struggling Umbridge and brought her closer. Then he said with a smile, Miss Umbridge, I don't want to waste any more time. Tell Yulia, 100,000 galleons, and I can stop pursuing the Travers family's rude behavior. I can also help her sort it out, Anduin said calmly. Umbridge's face changed drastically upon hearing Anduin's words. She looked both surprised and annoyed. How did he know this had something to do with the Travers family? And how was he so sure she was sent by Yulia? Anduin's audacity to demand such a high price left her speechless. Ignoring Umbridge's fluctuating expressions, Anduin continued, Or she can try other methods, like secretly killing Torquil. Oh, maybe she has already tried that. Presumably, she found out that Moody's guards are impenetrable, so she came to me. With that, he threw Umbridge forward, causing her to land heavily on the ground. He then sat down slowly and continued to drink leisurely from his glass. "Oh, that's right," Anduin added, taking a sip of his cold drink and sneering. "Remind her that the key is with me." Umbridge struggled to get up from the ground, glaring at Anduin with resentment before scrambling out of the room. After dismissing Umbridge, Anduin sat back on the sofa and closed his eyes to rest. However, he didn't have to wait long before there was another knock on the door. An elegant woman walked in. She had long, light blonde hair and was well-maintained, showing no signs of being a mother. Yulia was shocked when she heard the message from Umbridge. The key? What key was he referring to? It couldn't be the key she had hidden so secretly. It didn't match the place where the incident happened. Initially, she thought her brother-in-law had really attacked Anduin, but now it seemed she had misjudged the situation. Helping him get rid of the crime seemed almost impossible now, and it threatened the status of the entire family. After discovering that Torquil had been arrested, Yulia felt devastated and began thinking about how to solve this crisis. Torquil knew many of the family's core secrets. Fortunately, she had cast a mental protection spell on him, so he should be safe for now. However, the fact that the Travers family had been secretly supporting the Dark Lord had not been sealed. The most urgent task was to contact Torquil and put pressure on the Aurors to prevent them from using Veritaserum. If that didn't work, she needed to find a way to silence him and place all the charges on Torquil alone. But after many attempts, she found that Torquil was too tightly protected, with Moody himself in charge of guarding him. She couldn't even figure out the situation. With no way to break through to Torquil, Yulia had no choice but to send someone to try to contact Anduin. End of this chapter. Chapter 175. Yulia entered the room with a composed demeanor, despite her inner anxiety. She maintained a charming smile and an aristocratic grace, her eyes fixed on the young man who had brought her the startling news. She moved gracefully to the sofa in front of Anduin and sat down, waiting for him to speak first. Although Yulia tried her best to appear calm and elegant, Anduin could sense her underlying nervousness and panic. He remained relaxed, knowing he held the upper hand and that time was on his side. As he sipped his drink and looked at her, Yulia finally broke the silence. "Mr. Wilson, I heard that you wanted to see me. Now that you have your wish, is there something you want to say to me?" Yulia's voice was clear and crisp, almost soothing. Anduin gently put down his wine glass and stared at her. "First, it's not that I wanted to see you, but that you wanted to see me. Second, I have nothing to say to you. On the contrary, you must have something to say to me, as I am the only one who can solve your troubles." Yulia tried to deflect the conversation, hoping to gauge Anduin's intentions and character. "Oh, you are so bold, to claim you can solve our troubles. What troubles are you referring to? Can you clarify, Mr. Wilson?" Anduin, unimpressed by her evasiveness, responded directly. "It's very simple. The seat of the Wizengamot, the life and death of your Travers family. Are these not troublesome enough?" Yulia raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "Why are your words so profound? I can't understand them at all." "Then you should really check your head if you can't understand such simple words. But you can surely understand the word key," Anduin said pointedly. "Key? Do you mean a port key or a regular key?" Yulia asked, trying to remain calm despite her growing panic. Anduin took out a brass key from his pocket and held it up. "The key to the treasury," he said slowly. Yulia's worst fear had come true. Seeing the key, her body leaned forward involuntarily, her pupils contracted sharply, and her right hand clutched the armrest of the sofa, her nails digging into the fabric. How could this key be in his possession? Was Tokyo foolish enough to carry it with him? Her right hand moved towards her left hip, where her wand was hidden, ready to act if necessary. Yulia considered her options. Should she try to grab the key directly? As she pondered, she noticed Anduin quickly retract the key, a mocking expression on his face. No, the risk was too great. Judging by his posture, he was likely waiting for her to make a move. Damn it, she couldn't be fooled, and even if she got the key, she might not understand its significance. She couldn't afford to let him see any flaws in her plan. Heh. Yulia quickly adjusted her demeanor and smiled at Anduin. "Oh, so it's that key. Why is it in your hand?" I remember giving it to Tukil as a birthday present. It should be the key to an empty vault. You must have found it on him. Although you defeated him, it's not right to randomly search for others' property. Oh? Anduin's expression turned puzzled. So it's an empty vault? But what I saw from Torkel's memory, sealed by the Slytherin spirit protection curse, seems different. And who told you I found it on Tokiel? By the way, the safe of your Travers family is quite impressive. It took me a while to open it. Yulia couldn't maintain her composure after hearing Anduin's words. She jumped up from her seat as if electrocuted and stared at him. This guy knows. He knows about the protective spell. He knows about the safes. He must also know about the safe house. Did he also know what was kept in the vault? Yulia couldn't fathom how he had cracked the protective spell, but his accurate statements confirmed her fears. What do you want? Yulia asked, unable to keep her composure. Since he knew everything, continuing to probe would only make her look foolish. Anduin hadn't handed over the key, which meant he had demands and there was room for negotiation. I really wonder if you have a bad memory, Anduin said, standing up. He wasn't used to looking up at others. Didn't I inform you? 100,000 galleons! He enunciated each word clearly, looking down at Yulia, whose face had turned livid. That's impossible, Yulia retorted coldly, looking at Anduin in disbelief. 100,000 galleons? Do you think our family owns Gringotts? If the Travers family had that much money, we would have already become the Minister of Magic through bribery. Why would we follow the Dark Lord? Anduin knew the Travers family couldn't afford such a sum, but he had to start with an unacceptably high price to negotiate effectively. End of this chapter. Chapter 176. Do you know who you're facing? Anduin stared intently into Yulia's eyes. Then what kind of price do you think is suitable? He asked. Yulia panted heavily, her face showing clear displeasure. I'll give you 2,000 galleons at most. That's already the highest price. Oh, Anduin curled his lips. I didn't expect that a treasury of blackmail material would be worth so little to you. Are you begging me on the spot? There are 1,000 galleons in the safe alone. Seeing Anduin reveal the secrets in the vault, Yulia realized she had no luck left. She could only continue to argue. Since you found the safe, you should have found the unsigned title deed in it too. Isn't 2,000 galleons plus the 1,000 galleons and the title deed in the safe enough? Those galleons and the title deed are the spoils I obtained at the risk of my life. You must know that I almost died at Torkel's hands. How dare you use my spoils to bargain? It's a joke, Anduin sneered. Indeed, Anduin had risked his life. He stayed up all night, exhausted himself, conducted experiments, and endured torture. He even had to act for the Aurors, risking a 1 in a million chance of sudden death. For someone who valued regularity in work and rest, staying up late was tantamount to suicide. But Yulia still insisted on arguing. Do you know who you are facing? The Travers family is one of the oldest and most revered pure-blood families. If you accept this condition, you will be a friend of the Travers family. Otherwise, you are making an enemy of us and provoking the entire pure-blood community. Oh? You want to play tricks with me again, right? Trying to use both soft and hard tactics to fool me? Then do you know who you are facing right now? Anduin's expression turned tyrannical as he approached Yulia step by step, his gaze sharp as a knife. Yulia felt a stabbing pain from his intense stare. As he got closer, she couldn't help but back away. She stumbled over a chair and fell onto the sofa, looking up at Anduin, who loomed over her. Allow me to introduce myself properly. My name is Anduin Wilson. I just turned 14 this year. I am someone who doesn't like to argue because it only brings trouble and enemies. But if trouble and enemies come my way, I will not lose to anyone. I will deal with them before they even have a chance to act. Standing before you is an underage wizard who single-handedly eliminated 5 Death Eaters. Do you think he will be afraid of your broken family? I'm not negotiating with you based on your family's secrets. I'm relying on the strength to turn your proud pure-blood family into a mere memory. Listening to Anduin's words, each laced with murderous intent, Yulia felt a chill down her spine. When she recovered, she realized she was drenched in cold sweat. Are you trying to scare me? Yulia gritted her teeth, clinging to her last shred of stubbornness. No, I'm just stating a fact, warning you, and even threatening you. Anduin leaned down, his face inches from Yulia's, his tone icy. Under Anduin's relentless pressure, Yulia felt like a sheep cornered by a pack of hungry wolves. She couldn't help but tremble. But we can't come up with 100,000 galleons. You're trying to force us into an impossible situation, Yulia said softly, her voice trembling. She knew it was over. All the initiative had been completely seized by the young man in front of her. The only thing she could do now was to minimize the loss as much as possible. I understand, Yulia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Anduin stood up, returned to his seat, and sat down. If you don't have money, you can use other things to pay for it, such as materials, potions, and knowledge. What do you mean? Yulia asked, a sense of dread creeping into her heart as she looked at Anduin in a daze. You know exactly what I'm referring to. The Tefris family has a lot of valuable items in their treasury, don't they? For example, Slytherin's manuscripts, refined mithril, and that. Anduin didn't actually know what that was, but his previous insinuations had convinced Yulia that he had broken Torquiel's spiritual protection spell. Are you trying to strip us of our heritage and leave us with nothing? Yulia's voice trembled with a mix of anger and fear. How much of the Tefris family's secrets had been revealed by that traitor, Torquiel? Don't make it sound so harsh. I believe in one thing. As long as people are alive, there is hope. Isn't that true? Compared to accompanying Torquiel to rot in Azkaban, those are just material things. Anduin's tone softened, becoming almost persuasive. Yulia was torn. The Tefris family's treasury held the accumulated wealth and precious materials of several generations, possibly even more than 10 generations. It was her last line of defense, but Anduin spoke of it as if it were a pile of waste paper. Seeing that Yulia was still undecided, Anduin didn't push too hard. Instead, he took out his pocket watch and glanced at the time. Make a decision soon, Yulia. You don't have much time. The reporter from the Daily Prophet I made an appointment with is probably already on the way, Anduin reminded her with a chuckle. As if on cue, there was a sudden knock on the door. Please come in, Anduin said. An Auror walked in, and to Anduin's surprise, it was someone he knew. Senior Vanessa, long time no see, Anduin greeted her. Long time no see, Anduin, Vanessa replied. Noticing the guests in the room, she didn't linger on pleasantries. There's a female reporter named Rita Skeeter outside. She says you have an appointment with her. The captain asked me to check if you want her sent away. No, I did ask her to come, but she may have to wait a little longer. I still have things to discuss here, Anduin responded with a smile. Then you'd better hurry up. That woman is driving me crazy, pestering everyone she sees, Vanessa complained. End of this chapter. Chapter 177, The Asking Price. Don't worry, I won't keep you waiting for too long, Anduin assured, glancing at Yulia, whose face was contorted with worry. Probably not. Vanessa, who had just entered, noticed Anduin's guest but couldn't see her face as Yulia was seated with her back to the door. She could only tell it was a woman. You didn't encounter any trouble, did you? Vanessa asked with concern, having a good impression of Anduin. What trouble could I possibly have? This is a friend of mine. We finally met and are discussing life and future, Anduin replied with a genuine smile. Vanessa nodded, reassured. All right, then I'll leave you to it. Just don't take too long, or the woman might break in after a while. With that, Vanessa backed out and closed the door. See? I've always been honest and reliable, never lied. Have you made a decision now, or are you only satisfied if I hand over the key and your family's secrets to Minister Barnold? Anduin teased, looking at Yulia. Yulia was in turmoil, her mind a blank slate. Seeing her hesitation, Anduin snorted coldly and made a move to leave. Don't, Yulia exclaimed, startled by Anduin's actions. Have you figured it out? She asked, her voice trembling. Yulia sighed deeply, feeling utterly defeated. She nodded helplessly. As long as I agree, you can help me rescue Torquiel? She asked, seeking confirmation. Are you daydreaming? Torquiel can't be rescued that easily. Anduin shook his head. But didn't you say that if I agreed to your request, you could help me solve this matter? Yulia asked anxiously. I said I would help you solve it, but I never promised to let Torquiel go. He is Minister Barnold's treasure now, Anduin replied, raising his right hand and making a slicing motion across his neck. But I can help you get rid of him. He's under strict protection, surrounded by 3 layers of security. How do you plan to deal with him? Yulia asked, puzzled. That's my problem, not yours, Anduin sneered. Okay, assuming you have a way to deal with him, will you return the key to us? Yulia asked after taking a deep breath. Don't even think about the key, Anduin replied coldly. What? It's impossible for me to agree to this deal without the key, Yulia retorted, her anxiety overriding her composure. It's impossible to return it to you, Anduin sneered. But I can destroy it in front of you after the deal is made, and I can keep your secret safe so it won't be passed on. Are you kidding? Do you know how much effort we've put into the materials in the vault? You can't just destroy them, Yulia shouted angrily. Oh, then it seems there's no agreement. If you won't accept peace, then prepare for war, Anduin said, getting up to leave. Yulia was torn, her mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. As Anduin's hand reached the door handle, she couldn't bear to let him leave. Wait, Yulia almost yelled, her voice strained. That's right, sometimes a whole and peaceful family is better than a broken one, isn't it? Anduin said with a smile. A neat family? You just told me you'd help kill my brother-in-law, and now you talk about family peace? Yulia thought, seething with anger. But thinking of the Travers family and her underage child, she could only agree with hatred. Anduin didn't mind her anger. He returned to his seat, looking at her gently, waiting for her to speak. Okay, get rid of Torquil, destroy that key, and keep our secrets safe. Yulia finally agreed, her voice filled with resignation. The secret for us, and you have to promise not to be an enemy of us in the future, Yulia said, her voice trembling slightly. She was genuinely afraid of this boy now. Despite his young age, he was already full of cunning. At best, I agree to let you go this time, Anduin replied, unmoved. But if anyone from the Travers family dares to provoke me again, don't blame me for not warning you in advance. Yulia thought for a moment. She seemed to have no other choice, so she nodded in agreement. Yes, but after confirming the deal, you have to sign an unbreakable vow. Otherwise, I can't promise you anything. Fine, Anduin agreed, but the unbreakable vow must have a third person as a witness, and that witness must also be kept secret. Okay, Yulia nodded. When the time comes, you will be the witness first, and I will sign the unbreakable vow with another witness. Then, make an offer, Yulia sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. 30,000 galleons of gold, Anduin demanded. If that's not enough, I'll take half of the items in your family's treasury. This must include 4 ounces of refined mithril, a 4-foot-long dragon's heart tendon, and a copy of all the books in your family's library. Yulia was almost laughed out of anger. Are you kidding me? She thought. This boy really didn't see himself as an outsider. The price was outrageous, and she knew the value of the treasury best. Agreeing to such conditions would be worse than going to war. She might as well defect from England tomorrow. Impossible, Yulia retorted. I can promise 5,000 galleons at most. You can choose 3 pieces of materials from the treasury, up to 1 ounce of refined mithril. The dragon heart tendon is no problem, and the value of the family library is not lower than those materials. I will let you copy 20 books at most. Yulia knew it was time to test her bargaining skills, but she was a noble lady, not accustomed to haggling like Anduin, who had been in the market since he was a child. 25,000 galleons, Anduin countered. I'll make a small concession on the materials in the treasury, only 1/3, and 100 copies of the family collection. This is already a big concession from me. Don't be ignorant. Yulia shook her head and argued again. The two began to negotiate meticulously, haggling over the number of galleons down to 1 or 2, the materials in the treasury by a few pieces or ounces, and the number of books to be copied. After more than half an hour of intense negotiations, they finally reached a consensus on the transaction price. End of this chapter. Chapter 178, The Unbreakable Oath. Finally, after more than half an hour of negotiations, the two parties reached a consensus on the transaction price. For Yulia, this half hour felt like an eternity. With every word she spoke, it seemed as though the painstaking efforts of several generations were being wiped out. How could she not feel distressed? Anduin curled his lips, feeling a bit dissatisfied with the stinginess of the Travers family. However, the final outcome was much better than he had expected. making the effort worthwhile. Now that it's confirmed, I'm going to invite a witness to come and swear, Yulia said, wiping the sweat from her forehead. Remember not to look for that Umbridge. She's so incompetent that she might cast the wrong spell and kill me, Anduin reminded Yulia. She nodded helplessly and stood up. Unexpectedly, her legs gave way, and she almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, she grabbed the handle of the sofa to steady herself. The negotiation had taken a significant toll on her. She slowly walked out of the room, leaning against the wall for support. Yulia did not keep Anduin waiting long and soon returned with a middle-aged man. This is the director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, Cornelius Fudge. I think it would be best for him to be our witness, Yulia introduced weakly. Hello, Mr. Wilson. Your feat today is truly remarkable. Everyone in the Ministry of Magic is talking about you, Fudge greeted Anduin modestly. He had been suddenly summoned by Yulia to be a witness and was still trying to understand the situation. You're flattering me. This is what I should do. If you don't mind, let me preside over your unbreakable vow spell first, Anduin said with a smile. Oh, why do I have to swear? Fudge asked, a little confused. It's just for confidentiality. Don't worry, I won't embarrass you, Yulia added. She had seen an acquaintance and dragged him over without explaining the details clearly, and she certainly didn't dare to now. Fudge shrugged indifferently, then smiled and extended his right hand. Well, it's worth it for me to hold Yulia's right hand again. Yulia didn't respond to Fudge's compliment. She just extended her right hand numbly and shook hands with him. Cornelius Fudge, are you willing to keep secret what you see and hear next, and everything about me and Yulia? Anduin asked, while pulling out his wand and channeling his magic. I am willing, Fudge replied easily, though a bit puzzled. Yulia breathed a sigh of relief and then said, Okay, it's our turn next. Anduin nodded noncommittally, then took out a piece of parchment from his pocket. He slightly modified a few numbers on it with a quill, handed it to Fudge, and said, Next, please follow the content on the parchment for the oath. This little bastard really planned it long ago, Yulia thought as she saw Anduin filling in some numbers. But it was too late to change anything now, so she could only accept it with gritted teeth. Fudge, who took the parchment, felt very relaxed, appreciating the thoughtful preparation of the oath copy. However, as he read the content on the parchment, his eyes widened in shock. If he knew Chinese, he would have definitely yelled 3 times. He looked up at Yulia, then back at the parchment, and then at Anduin again, as if to confirm he wasn't dreaming. Hurry up, Mr. Fudge. We are still in a hurry, Anduin urged. Yulia, are you serious about what's on this? Fudge, still in disbelief, confirmed with Yulia. Yulia, now feeling the weight of every passing minute, nodded with a livid face. She then extended her right hand and held it with Anduin. After confirming, Fudge swallowed hard, drew out his wand, and pointed it at their wrists. With a trembling voice, Fudge read the oath. Julia Travers, are you willing to deliver to Anduin Wilson 12,749 galleons of gold, 4 pounds of fairy silver, 3 ounces of refined mithril, a 4-foot-long dragon heartstring, 1 pound of goblin-forged Ulam steel, 3 pounds of agripar alloy, 6 pounds of Palliser brass, 2 pounds of Felix felicis, 1 pound of Hungarian horntail hide, 300 pounds of mooncalf skins, and allow Anduin Wilson to copy any books at will from the Travers collection, ensuring that all books displayed are from the collection owned before today, with no private collection or transfer allowed. I am willing, Julia shouted, her face livid, almost gritting her teeth. This time she was losing the wealth accumulated by 3 or 4 generations. Fudge, having read the long list of materials for several minutes, took a deep breath, looked at Anduin, and continued. Anduin Wilson, are you willing to keep the family secrets for Julia Travers, destroy the key to Gringotts Vault 726, and resolve the trouble Torquil caused the Travers family, agreeing not to embarrass the Travers family again in this conflict? Fudge almost read this sentence with a trembling voice, and it sounded as if Julia was begging for mercy from the young man in front of her. I am willing, Anduin replied with a smile. Then a thin, blazing tongue of fire shot from his wand, like a red-hot wire, wrapping around their clasped hands. The unbreakable vow was sealed. After finishing the oath, Julia seemed to have lost all her strength and was about to fall when she staggered. Fortunately, Fudge reacted quickly and supported her. "Fulfill your oath, Anduin," Julia said to Anduin with a pale face. "As you wish." Anduin took out the key, threw it in the air, and then used his wand to summon a flame to burn it. After a while, the brass key melted into a metal ball. "And Torquil, he is under the protection of Moody now. What will you do?" Julia looked at Anduin angrily. "Isn't that simple?" Anduin raised his right hand, snapped his fingers, and said, "Okay, it's resolved." "Are you kidding me?" Julia felt that she was being played with and was about to step forward to question him. "Am I kidding? Just go and check for yourself. Why don't you let me know one or two magic tricks you don't know?" Anduin sneered as he looked at Julia's frustration. End of this chapter. Chapter 179, Civilian Heroes. "Are you kidding? Just go and check for yourself. As a wizard, why don't you let me know a few spells that you don't know?" Anduin sneered, looking at Julia's distressed expression. "Or, do you also want to try the power of my unique magic?" He gradually approached Julia as he spoke. Julia, taken aback, stomped her feet and walked out of the room suspiciously. "Remember to get my reward ready. Don't make me wait too long," Anduin reminded her, watching her retreating back. Fudge, who had been observing the exchange, seemed to be in a daze. He felt as if he had heard something terrible, but couldn't share it due to the oath of secrecy. "Mr. Fudge," Anduin called out to the director. "Ah!" Fudge was startled and replied weakly. He had just seen Julia, a strong woman, forced to leave by this young wizard, and now he couldn't help but feel a bit intimidated by him. "When you go out, please invite the reporter from the Daily Prophet in for me," Anduin requested, half begging and half commanding, not caring that Fudge was the director of the Ministry of Magic. "Oh, good," Fudge responded with a forced smile, as if Anduin were his superior, and then carefully walked out of the room. Meanwhile, at the Auror headquarters, Moody was furious. In the interrogation room where Torquil was being held, he, Director Barty Crouch, and Minister Millicent Barnold were watching Torquil Travers, who was gradually waking up, preparing to interrogate him together. Suddenly, Torquil clutched his stomach and let out a painful howl. Despite Moody's attempts to heal him with various spells and potions, it was to no avail, and Torquil lost his life. Witnessing this, not only Moody, but also Minister Barnold and Director Crouch turned pale. "What's going on here? Why did he suddenly die in full view?" Millicent Barnold asked Moody in confusion. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like this. It doesn't look like he was under a curse. It's a bit like a curse, and a bit like, could it be?" Moody's face darkened as he turned his head. "Scrimgeour! Where are you, Scrimgeour?" Rufus Scrimgeour, the deputy captain of the battering squad, hurried into the room upon hearing the shout. "What's the matter, Moody? What potion did Torquil drink just now? Who brought it? Who fed him? Where's the potion bottle?" Moody fired questions at Scrimgeour like a cannonball. "Torquil?" Scrimgeour noticed that Torquil's body had gradually turned cold. "He's dead? Are you suspicious?" "That's right. It's either cursed or poisoned. Hurry up and investigate," Moody shouted angrily, pointing at the door. Understanding the urgency, Scrimgeour rushed out of the interrogation room. "Damn it, we were so close and those bastards succeeded again." Moody stomped his crutches fiercely, cursing through gritted teeth. He knew there was probably nothing to be found out, but he didn't expect those bastards to react so quickly and act so decisively. Minister Barnold and Director Crouch were also visibly upset, while Moody paced back and forth in the room, seething with anger. "Hey, okay, no matter what, capturing the 5 Death Eaters this time is already a great achievement. It's just a pity that the big fish got away." Barty Crouch sighed, trying to comfort Moody. "That's right. Speaking of which, isn't Anduin Wilson the one who helped us arrest 4 Death Eaters at Christmas 2 years ago?" Millicent Barnold quickly regained composure and asked about the hero of this time. "Yes, in that battle, he even saved Harry's life, the savior Harry Potter," Moody reported seriously, despite his inability to calm down. "Well, he is young and promising. He has—" Millicent Barnold spoke thoughtfully. "He did a great job this time. He arranged for us to meet as soon as possible. It's been a long time since we've had such exciting news from the wizarding world." "Oh, what do you mean?" Barty Crouch asked tentatively, trying to grasp the minister's implication. civilian heroes, and they are also Muggle-born underage wizards. Isn't such news the best morale booster? Millicent smiled at Crouch. That's right, but what about Dumbledore? Will he have any objections? This is his student, after all, Crouch asked hesitantly. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. What can he say? Moody interrupted, his voice loud and confident. I remember he wanted to keep a low profile after Anduin's last contribution. He was afraid that overexposure would bring danger to the kid, Crouch explained to Moody. Ha ha ha! Now that the mysterious people are gone, there's nothing to be afraid of. As for the ordinary dark wizards, I'm not bragging, but they probably can't be Anduin with one hand. You don't know how impressive his equipment is. Moody laughed, practically drooling at the thought of all the good things about Anduin. It seems that Moody has a lot of confidence in Anduin. In that case, let's make this decision. I will explain to Dumbledore if he asks. Let's go. Let the remaining Death Eaters wait for the public trial, Millicent Barnold said decisively. Yes, Moody and Crouch answered in unison. Meanwhile, Anduin finally met the Daily Prophet reporter, Rita Skeeter, again. Mr. Wilson, I really didn't expect you to think of me first after such a feat. It's truly an honor, Rita Skeeter said, her voice filled with excitement. Although she was already a well-known reporter, she was more famous for breaking celebrity gossip. When the incident happened that morning, the newspaper had received a tip-off, but the law enforcement department was so strict in protecting the information that they didn't even know what had happened. They only found out that a few Death Eaters were dragged into the Ministry of Magic by Aurors early in the morning. After spending a long time at the entrance of the ministry, they realized that it was an underage wizard who had taken down 5 Death Eaters. Originally, this level of news was not accessible to a reporter like her, so she had to settle for taking a photo from afar. Who knew that good news would come from the sky and Anduin's invitation letter would fall into her hands? With this letter, she confidently stormed the law enforcement division. End of this chapter. Chapter 180, The Efficient Rita Skeeter. I just happened to know your name, and I feel that we have a fate together, so I found you, Anduin said, smiling at Rita Skeeter. Oh, I didn't expect you to be so discerning. I am confident that within 10 years I will become the most famous front-page reporter, Rita Skeeter replied excitedly, her eyes gleaming with ambition. The shorthand quill beside her seemed to share her enthusiasm, scribbling furiously on the parchment. So, Mr. Wilson, as an underage wizard, you defeated 5 Death Eaters this morning and trampled them under your feet. How did you do it? Is it because you come from Slytherin, known for being shrewd and cunning? Or do you have undercover agents among the Death Eaters? Or was this a trap you set, waiting for them to take the bait? My God, I feel there are countless secrets waiting to be uncovered. Rita's imagination ran wild, and her quill continued to write as if recording the real events. Anduin quickly raised his hand to stop her. He was genuinely worried that this imaginative reporter might guess the truth if she kept going. Rita Skeeter didn't give him a chance to speak, lost in her own thoughts, while her quill filled in the details. He now understood why her reports were so notorious. She could fabricate an entire story the moment she saw you. When Rita saw Anduin interrupt her, she stared at him with piercing eyes, eager to expand on any word he might say. But Anduin was focused on efficiency. He pulled out a folded piece of parchment from his pocket and tossed it lightly in front of her. Then, he took out a small leather bag and threw it into her arms. Report according to the content on the parchment. You don't need to write more, and you are not allowed to write more. Understand? Anduin pointed at the small bag in her arms. The bag contains 20 galleons, your reward. Mr. Wilson, what do you mean? Rita Skeeter was a bit at a loss. She had been paid to write stories before, but never so straightforwardly. Anduin seemed unwilling to let go of such big news so easily. That's exactly what it means. Anduin then took out a messenger coin from his pocket and used a transformation spell, turning it into a beetle, identical to Rita Skeeter's animagus form. He placed the metal beetle into her palm and said indifferently, I will notify you through this in the future. We will cooperate, and you will become famous more easily. Understand? Seeing the metal beetle in her hand, Rita Skeeter felt a chill run down her spine. He knew her biggest secret, that she was an illegal animagus. This? Rita Skeeter hesitated, holding the little beetle. What is this? It's just a small gift from me. Don't take it too seriously, Anduin said as he stood up and walked out. He glanced back at Rita, who was still sitting on the sofa in a daze. What are you still doing sitting there? Shouldn't it be time to take pictures? Yes, I understand. Rita quickly stood up, putting away the money bag and the metal beetle. In just a few minutes, Anduin had led her by the nose, concise and efficient. After they went outside, they took a few very decent half-length photos in front of the photographer. Rita Skeeter then hurried out of the gate of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The staff of the Ministry of Magic looked very surprised. This woman, who usually wanted to dig to the bottom of every story, had left so quickly. You caught someone before. Why did you suddenly become efficient after entering the room? Vanessa, who was on duty nearby, approached Anduin and asked, Anduin, why did that woman become quiet all of a sudden? She was chattering and arranging us just now. Who knows? Maybe she's actually an introvert, Anduin replied casually, then quickly changed the subject. By the way, Vanessa, someone was here just now, and I didn't have a chance to catch up with you. Congratulations on becoming an official Auror. Moody said your internship performance is the best he's seen in recent years. Really? Vanessa smiled at the compliment. It's mainly because of Chief Moody's excellent guidance. But even though I've become an official Auror, I still don't get many opportunities to go on field missions. I'm mostly handling paperwork in the office. By the way, you really stole the limelight this time. The minister just instructed me to take you to see her when you come out. Is that so? Let's go there now. Anduin nodded, then suddenly remembered something and asked, By the way, can you do me a favor? What's the matter? Just say it, Vanessa responded casually. I have an unsigned land deed here. Can you convert it into a personal land deed for me? Anduin asked as he took out the land deed from his pocket. He felt uneasy carrying it around. If it were accidentally lost or damaged, it would be troublesome. He intended to bind it to himself as soon as possible, since he had no need to leave it for future generations. Why do you have that kind of thing? Unsigned land deeds are very precious. There aren't many in the entire magical world. Converting a personal land deed into an unsigned one is very troublesome, but converting an unsigned land deed into a personal one is quite simple. This kind of title deed is valuable, Vanessa said, looking at the deed curiously, then at Anduin in astonishment. The property in Diagon Alley, where did it come from? She asked in surprise. I found it on those Death Eaters. It's mine now. It's not against the rules, Anduin explained. He knew that property seized from Dark Wizards or Death Eaters, except for wands or items with owners, did not need to be handed over. This allowed him to take it out publicly and legalize it. Since Torquil was dead and there was no proof of ownership, he could claim it without issue. It's not against the rules. As long as it's not a personal title deed that can prove the ownership of the property, it can be classified as individual property, Vanessa confirmed with a nod. End of this chapter.